The swamp was silent, too silent. After 2 weeks of constant danger, the squad finally found a place that looked safe. A clear pond, calm water, even bamboo swaying in the breeze. For the first time, everyone relaxed. Everyone except Han Li. While the others rested, he kept watching. Because in a place like this, peace was never real. And in the next moment, the bamboo moved. The ground twisted. The pond itself opened its mouth. What they thought was refuge was actually a perfect killing trap. I really love making these videos, but I need your support to keep going. Please like, share, and subscribe so I don't have to give up on this dream. The floating dawn swamp lived up to its ominous reputation. For reasons unknown upon entering the swamp, Han Li's spiritual sense was restricted to a range of no more than 300 meters. Within the pervasive illusory fog, there was little one could rely on for protection. However, the most troublesome threat was the strange, sharp worms hidden within the damp sludge. These worms possessed bodies and limbs similar to centipedes, yet along their forms were countless slender, needle-like mouths. Each of these could spit venom capable of corroding magic treasures and consuming a cultivator's protective light. A single worm or two would not have been worth concern, but they always moved in groups. From the moment the squad entered the swamp, dozens of these worms would emerge at once whenever disturbed. Each was roughly 3 meters long and capable of flight. Naturally, every encounter forced the squad to react immediately. Had they not been assigned patrol duties, they could have simply flown high above the swamp and avoided dealing with the worms entirely. But as a patrol unit, they were required to investigate traces of foreign tribes, a task impossible to accomplish from high altitude. They had no choice but to remain close to the ground. As a result, attacks from the worms became frequent and unavoidable. There was even an occasion when they disturbed an especially large swarm, provoking more than 400 worms at once. If not for Han Li's divine essence-fused light, the swarm would have overwhelmed the group and caused heavy casualties. Instead, the light suspended the worms mid-air, allowing them to be incinerated by spirit fire. At first, the squad had harbored doubts about Han Li, having never witnessed his abilities. But now their confidence in him had grown considerably. Of course, the floating dawn swamp held dangers beyond the worms. There were also ancient silverhead beasts that concealed themselves within the dense jungle. These creatures could separate their heads from their bodies, splitting into multiple parts to launch different attacks. Even Han Li found them difficult to deal with. Fortunately, their movements were slow and the terrain hindered them. As long as the squad kept their distance by flying, the beasts could not pursue. Thus, compared to the sharp worms, they were less threatening. Even so, Han Li and the others gradually came to understand why the floating dawn swamp was classified as a first-grade patrol zone. They had to remain constantly alert. A moment of carelessness could result in injury. Under such conditions, 2 weeks passed quickly. Although the squad maintained vigilance throughout, they found no trace of foreign tribes, much to everyone's relief. The tense atmosphere gradually eased. One day, after flying for most of the day, while holding foreign spirit plates, several cultivators began to show signs of fatigue. Even high-grade cultivators could not endure such prolonged mental strain, as patrol required constant awareness. At that time, they arrived before a clear pond about 300 meters wide. Beside it lay a small pile of scattered rocks, and from them grew a cluster of slender green bamboo. The scene was tranquil like a painting. Their spirits lifted. The large green-eyed man exchanged glances with the others before approaching Han Li and respectfully said, "Senior Han, this place seems suitable. How about we rest briefly before continuing? That is acceptable. But remain cautious. First check for anything unusual," Han Li replied calmly. During the mission, Han Li rarely issued direct orders and was open to suggestions, which gradually reduced the distance between him and the squad. "Understood," the green-eyed man replied with a smile, gesturing to the others. 2 elderly men and the pair of women quickly spread out, circling the area. When the foreign spirit plate showed no reaction, they landed beside the rocks near the pond with relief. As time was limited, they simply chose clean spots to sit and rest. As a deity transformation cultivator who practiced the great development arts, Han Li was not particularly strained by the patrol. Instead of resting, he slowly walked around the pond, observing his surroundings. The pond was shallow and the water was clear. Within it swam small silver fish, the size of fingers, appearing harmless. Han Li frowned slightly at the sight. He unconsciously raised his head and looked toward the bamboo grove. A faint breeze stirred nearby, yet it produced almost no sound, enhancing the quiet atmosphere. The cultivators sat either by the water's edge or near the bamboo, remaining still. Han Li then turned his gaze to the mirror-like surface of the pond, murmured briefly to himself, and narrowed his eyes slightly. He slowly turned and stepped toward the bamboo grove. In that brief moment, however, his fingers moved subtly within his sleeves. A flash of red light appeared as 10 thin red lines sank silently into the ground. The action was completely concealed. When Han Li reached the bamboo grove, he stopped and calmly observed it. His behavior appeared unusual. The youth surnamed Yin and the woman surnamed Shu noticed this and exchanged puzzled glances. Han Li paid them no attention. His gaze turned cold and he opened his mouth. A streak of golden light shot out, slicing through the bamboo like lightning. With a sharp crack, a bamboo stalk as thick as a bowl split in half. "Yi!" the youth surnamed Yin exclaimed in shock. Fairy Shu also widened her eyes. Before they could react, an unexpected scene unfolded. A stream of dark green liquid sprayed from the split bamboo, releasing an extremely foul odor. At nearly the same moment, the ground trembled. A painful roar echoed as the bamboo grove shook violently. The green stalks twisted into thick hair-like tentacles and lashed toward Han Li. Naturally, such an attack posed no threat to him. His figure blurred and disappeared, reappearing above the pond as he looked down coldly at the writhing tentacles. The resting cultivators were startled and hurriedly flew into the air, releasing their magic treasures to strike the tentacles. Seeing Han Li easily sever one, they initially underestimated the threat. However, upon impact, the tentacles emitted metallic sounds, effortlessly deflecting the attacks. As the others were still astonished, the grey stones by the pond suddenly turned black. The scattered rocks twisted together, forming skull-sized black scales that belonged to a massive ancient beast. The creature's body was round with no visible nose or mouth. On its back extended thin tentacles over 30 meters long. It had been concealed beside the pond, and the bamboo grove was merely a transformation of its flesh. The cultivators had unknowingly been resting atop its body. It had used an unknown ability to evade both spiritual sense and the foreign spirit plate. "Attack!" Han Li shouted from above. The cultivators immediately reacted, releasing their treasures. Multicolored lights filled the air, converging upon the massive beast. The beast showed no intention of retreating. Instead, its tentacles moved rapidly, forming grey blurs that intercepted the incoming attacks. Each collision produced a dull explosion, and every treasure was repelled before reaching its true body. The youth surnamed Ying snorted coldly. He clapped his hands and raised them, forming spheres of red and yellow light in each palm. He then unleashed a barrage of fist-sized lightning fireballs toward the beast. At the same time, Fairy Shu emitted a cold silver glow. Countless ice-attributed lightning spheres formed and surged forward. The two types of lightning merged, creating formidable force. A deafening explosion followed, and blinding lightning engulfed most of the beast. The others could not help but show faint smiles. Meanwhile, Han Li remained motionless, observing the attacks without intervening. Humph! A chilling snort suddenly emerged from within the lightning. A strange wind rose from below. The wind was hazy and unstable. It spiraled upward, forming a tornado that swept up the lightning fireballs. Explosions sounded within the vortex before both the tornado and lightning dissipated. The youth surnamed Ying and Fairy Shu were alarmed, and the others showed shock. A figure appeared atop the beast. Its skin was green, resembling some unknown hide. It wore no clothing, had a bald head, and only nostrils where a nose should be. Its eyes were devoid of emotion. More strangely, its lower body was fused with the beast, as though they were a single entity. A savage beastman. Kill him at once. We cannot let him merge with the beast. At the sight of the strange figure, Taoist priestman cried out in alarm. The others were immediately shaken. Without hesitation, they released their rarely used ancient treasures, streaks of light flashing through the air. In an instant, both the beastman and the ancient beast were bombarded by attacks. Hanli observed that his subordinates were deeply wary of this foreign race. To the confusion of the cultivators, he still did not act. Even as the beastman approached transformation, he remained suspended in the air with his hands behind his back, leaving the battle entirely to them. Just as the cultivators began to feel the pressure, the beastman suddenly counterattacked, leaving them no chance to call for Hanli. The beastman let out a strange laugh. Its shoulders blurred, generating a yellow tornado that surged toward the cultivators. At the same time, the ancient beast's body turned an intense green, and its tentacles rapidly extended. They lashed out in green blurs, striking in coordination with the tornado. No matter the attacks, lightning flames, or swordlight, everything was swept into the tornado and vanished. When struck by the tentacles, the attacks were repelled. The cultivators fell into disarray, unable to respond effectively. Meanwhile, Hanli continued to watch without moving. No one noticed that the small silver fish in the pond had formed two orbs gleaming like a pair of silver eyes. The calm surface of the water suddenly churned violently, revealing a transparent mouth over 10 meters wide, lined with crystalline, ice-like fangs. The pond itself had transformed into a transparent monster. At that moment, the enormous creature stirred and lunged silently toward Hanli in mid-air, its form nearly imperceptible. Hanli remained focused on the battle ahead, as if unaware of the attack. When the transparent beast came within 10 meters, its silver eyes flashed, and it bared its fangs. Grey light flickered behind Hanli. Countless thin strands of divine essence-fused light shot forward. The beast sensed danger and attempted to evade, but it was too late. With a sound like rain striking the ground, the grey strands pierced its body, twisting and binding it tightly. Hanli's figure blurred as he approached the creature. With a brief glance, he opened his mouth and spat out a small black mountain. It spun in the air and rapidly expanded, becoming a towering 300-meter mountain suspended above the beast. Realizing the danger, the creature violently struggled to escape. However, as a water-attributed entity, it could not break free from the bindings of the divine essence-fused light. The grey strands merely tightened. Hanli softly recited an incantation. A deep rumbling filled the air as the mountain descended, crushing the transparent beast beneath it. The impact shook the surroundings. The creature was driven into the earth completely suppressed. Hanli looked at it without expression. At that moment, a loud cry from behind drew his attention. He slowly turned, frowning. The cultivators were still engaged with the beastman. Upon seeing the transparent monster restrained, the beastman let out a panicked roar. It immediately abandoned control of the tornado and disengaged from the green-eyed man. Instead, it struck the beast beneath it and rapidly sank into its body. Not good. He's merging with it. Stop him. The green-eyed man, who had just felt relief, turned tense again. Youth Ying and the others were alarmed. They poured more spiritual power into their treasures, intensifying their attacks. However, even without control, the tornado continued to obstruct them. During this delay, green light spread across the beast's body and bulges began to form. First legs appeared, then arms. Finally, its body stretched and a bald head emerged. Under the beastman's control, the creature transformed into a 100-meter-tall black giant. Its body was covered in dark purple-black scales, and its eyes glowed like green lanterns. Without a word, the giant raised its hand and struck downward black light flashing from its fist. Thunderous explosions followed. A dozen magic treasures were shattered into dust. Most others fled upward with sharp cries. Fairy Shu frowned and let out a cold snort. She alone continued her attack, pointing at her snow-white flying sword. With a sharp ringing sound, it expanded to 10 meters and blurred, vanishing instantly. The next moment, it reappeared above the giant and slashed downward. She intended to decapitate it in a single strike. However, contrary to her expectations, the giant moved with surprising speed. As the sword descended, it opened its mouth and released a gust of wind, knocking the sword aside. It then grasped the sword firmly with one hand. A sinister expression appeared as it raised its other hand to crush it. Fairy Shu's face turned pale. The sword was her bonded treasure. If it were destroyed, the backlash would be severe. She hastily formed seals to retrieve it. The sword trembled violently, releasing waves of icy white chi, but the giant's grip remained unshaken. The giant inhaled deeply, preparing to destroy it. At that instant, space nearby distorted. A dense beam of black light struck the giant's chest. Though small compared to its massive body, the impact forced it to stagger backward several steps. The beam vanished as quickly as it appeared. A silver flame bird followed, diving toward the giant. Despite its small size, the giant reacted with fear. Instead of resisting, it turned and fled. After only 2 steps, sharp wind rose from the ground. A dozen red threads shot upward, wrapping around its legs and forming blazing ropes that bound it in place. Unable to move forward, the giant struck downward in fury, attempting to break free. The silver flame bird did not give it the chance. It shot forward and collided with the giant's back, transforming into a mass of silver flames. A crackling sound followed as the flames spread rapidly, engulfing the giant. Trapped, it could only scream in pain, summoning yellow winds to extinguish the fire. But when the winds touched the silver flames, they ignited as well. Within moments, both fire and wind consumed the giant completely. Soon the screams ceased. The giant collapsed, its body reduced to ash, leaving nothing behind. The cultivators witnessed everything. Although Han Li had previously used his spirit-devouring flames, never had they seen such power. Facing the destroyed beastman, they stood in stunned silence. At that moment, Han Li moved, appearing above the silver flames. He beckoned lightly. The flames condensed into a sphere and returned to him as a small firebird. The flaming ropes also withdrew, turning into red threads that vanished into his sleeve. Han Li glanced at the suppressed, transparent beast and said calmly, "Retrieve the savage beastman. Deliver it to the foreign spirit hall when we return." "Yes, Junior Ma will handle it immediately." The green-eyed man's heart trembled as he responded. He flipped his hand, producing a white gourd inscribed with dense silver runes, a tool refined specifically to contain foreign beings. As long as the target was below true spirit grade, it could be captured. The beastman, now weakened and motionless, offered no resistance. When the green-eyed man approached the essence-fused mountain, he extended the gourd toward the transparent beast beneath it. With a gentle flick of his wrist, the gourd released a stream of silver mist into the air. The mist circled the massive mountain before condensing into enormous silver characters, which instantly sank into the body of the beast. As the silver light enveloped the creature, its body rapidly shrank to the size of a fist. However, the essence-fused mountain shrank at the same pace, leaving the beast no opportunity to escape. The gourd then emitted another wave of silver mist, which completely covered the diminished creature. At the same time, Han Li pointed from a distance. The small black mountain slowly lifted into the air, allowing the beast to be drawn into the gourd. The green-eyed man quickly sealed the gourd with its lid and placed a golden talisman on top. Only then did he let out a breath of relief. The others had already withdrawn their magic tools and descended to the ground. When they looked at Han Li, their expressions carried clear respect. The recent battle had revealed that their squad leader possessed unfathomable strength. He was far from an ordinary deity transformation cultivator. While they felt a sense of joy, there was also a trace of awe. "Rest for a moment before we proceed." After storing the mountain back into his sleeve, Han Li spoke briefly. He then walked to the side and sat down, closing his eyes in meditation. Naturally, no one objected. The others also spread out and began to recover their magic power. Only Fairy Shu remained standing. After a short hesitation, she approached Han Li and gave a respectful curtsy. "Many thanks for Senior's assistance. Otherwise, my ice crystal sword would have been destroyed." Han Li opened his eyes and examined her calmly. "An ice crystal sword. You must have refined it using myriad-year profound jade. Fairy Shu's heart trembled slightly. Senior is truly perceptive. The main material of my sword is indeed profound jade. Han Li's gaze flickered as he continued. Since your sword embodies extreme cold, your cultivation technique must also be ice attributed. May I ask if you know someone? Please speak, Senior. After a brief pause, she agreed. Han Li looked into her shimmering eyes and spoke through voice transmission. There was an ancient cultivator named Fairy Ice Soul. She ascended to the spirit realm and cultivated extreme cold techniques. Do you know of her? When he looked at her, he felt a faint sense of familiarity. Upon closer inspection, her eyes resembled those of Fairy Ice Soul as seen during the opening of the Spirit Void Hall in the North Night Palace. Although it had only been an image, Fairy Ice Soul's eyes had shimmered like starlight, leaving a deep impression on him. Now that he saw this woman cultivating ice techniques and wielding a treasure made from profound jade, he asked out of curiosity, Fairy Ice Soul, she is an ancestor of my Shu clan. Did Senior know her? Could it be that Senior also ascended from the same lower realm? Fairy Shu replied through voice transmission, clearly shocked. Ha ha. I did not know her personally, but I did benefit from what she left behind in the lower realm. Han Li chuckled lightly before asking, why is your flying sword not entirely refined from myriad-year profound jade? Its power could have increased by at least half. Still unsettled by the connection, she quickly regained composure. Senior must be joking. Although myriad-year profound jade is not as rare as the finest materials of the wildlands, it is still extremely difficult to obtain. The jade in my sword was purchased at great cost. Han Li nodded slightly. I see. I happen to have some myriad-year profound jade. It is enough to fully refine your sword. Since you are connected to Fairy Ice Soul, I will give it to you. Consider it a return of favor. He brushed his storage bracelet and produced a 1-foot-long jade box which he handed to her. Many thanks, Senior. She was visibly delighted and quickly expressed her gratitude. When she opened the box, she could not help but gasp. Inside were 4 fist-sized pieces of white stone, each emitting a cold, radiant glow. Not only was it sufficient to refine her flying sword, but there was also enough to craft an additional magic treasure. A trace of excitement flashed in her eyes. After storing the box, she gave Han Li a deep bow. Han Li merely waved his hand and closed his eyes once more. Whether it was the heaven-void cauldron, the glacial quintessence, or the glacial flames, all seemed to be closely tied to Fairy Ice Soul. Since he had gained considerable benefits from them, assisting her descendant helped ease a lingering obligation, reducing potential concerns when facing inner demons in the future. After obtaining such a valuable item, Fairy Shu tactfully refrained from disturbing him further and quietly withdrew. From a distance, the others observed the interaction between Han Li and Fairy Shu. Seeing her obvious joy upon receiving the jade box, a clear contrast to her usual composed demeanor, many grew curious. However, none dared to ask. About 6 hours later, Han Li gave the order and they set out again. For the remainder of their journey, they encountered no other foreign tribes. After completing their patrol route, they arrived at a designated location and waited for the arrival of a Gold Corp boat. The squad was then transported back to Deep Heaven City in 2 groups. During their mission, they had captured a beast controlled by the savage beastman. After handing it over to the Foreign Spirit Hall, they received a substantial reward. According to regulations, each patrol was followed by half a year of rest. After 10 years, their patrol assignment was complete, and the patrol areas and routes would be reassigned. Because Han Li had independently completed the patrol, for the first time he was awarded an earth-cleansing pill, which he immediately consumed. Soon afterward, the squad returned to the hall and dispersed. The cultivators bid farewell to Han Li before departing. As Fairy Shu prepared to leave, she said, Senior Han, in 2 days, there will be a triannual auction for items from the wilderness. You may wish to attend. Han Li raised an eyebrow. Items from the wilderness. Are you interested as well? She smiled wryly. Senior must be joking. Only deity transformation cultivators are eligible to participate. As I am merely a nascent soul cultivator, I do not qualify. Moreover, the prices are exceedingly high. I cannot afford such items. However, Senior may find something worthwhile. Thank you for the information, fellow Taoist. I will take a look. Hanlai replied calmly. Seeing that he accepted her suggestion, she respectfully took her leave. Hanli watched her departing figure, his eyes narrowing slightly. In truth, even if she had not mentioned the auction, he had no intention of leaving the city immediately. Since arriving in the spirit realm, he had not yet obtained suitable pill formulas or medicinal resources. He had planned to do so after completing the patrol. Now that an auction was approaching, it was a convenient opportunity. After all, he was well aware of the extraordinary reputation of wilderness items. With this in mind, Hanli calmly left the massive stone pagoda and flew toward the market indicated on his map. The market of Deep Heaven City was vast, containing rare materials from the 3 human realms and 7 demon lands. Occasional appearances of wilderness items further increased its activity. Both city guards and outsiders moved freely throughout the market. Most striking was the massive light barrier that separated the human and demon clans, dividing the area into 2 distinct sections. At the center of the city stood a large hall that connected to a shared trading area, where both humans and demons could exchange materials and wilderness items. After all, certain items held no value for one side but could be valuable to the other. The auction itself would take place in a side chamber of this hall. In a streak of light, Han Li landed on a street within the market, stopping near a medicinal shop. He entered without hesitation. "Senior, what are you looking for?" "Although my shop is small, we carry a wide range of medicines." The shop was modest. A core formation, middle-aged shopkeeper and 2 foundation establishment attendants were present, with no other customers. Upon seeing Han Li enter in dark azure armor, the shopkeeper immediately stood up with a welcoming smile. "Do you have any pill formulas or spirit medicines that can advance cultivation?" Han Li asked directly. "For a deity transformation cultivator, I do have 2 pill formulas, but the required materials are extremely rare and not available in my store." The shopkeeper's expression brightened at the prospect of business. Han Li frowned slightly. "Then bring out the formulas. I will examine them." "Yes, please wait a moment, Senior." The shopkeeper responded respectfully. He instructed a servant, offered Han Li a seat and tea, and then quickly headed to the back of the shop. Han Li felt a quiet sense of satisfaction at being able to obtain the items he needed without difficulty. He sat in a simple bamboo chair, calmly sipping spirit tea at an unhurried pace. After some time, the middle-aged shopkeeper returned holding a storage bracelet. Upon approaching Han Li, he swept his hand across the bracelet, producing a white jade slip and a blue jade slip. He then took out a large assortment of boxes and bottles, placing them neatly beside the table. Once finished, he stood respectfully to the side and waited. Han Li glanced over the items, then summoned the 2 jade slips into his hand. He infused them with his spiritual sense and began to examine their contents. The clear jade pill and the true toad liquid. Han Li murmured softly. His brow furrowed slightly as he withdrew his spiritual sense. The clear jade pill was acceptable. Its ingredients consisted of rare medicinal herbs, some of which he had never encountered before. Most of these herbs required a maturation of 2,000 to 3,000 years, though they were still considered relatively common. As for the true toad liquid, it was rather unusual. Its primary ingredient was the spirit blood of an ancient wilderness beast, known as the green-eyed toad, supplemented by more common materials. Although both could be used by deity transformation stage cultivators, the clear jade pill was only effective for those in the early stage. Its effects diminished significantly for those in the mid-stage. The true toad liquid, on the other hand, possessed much stronger medicinal power, but it was more suitable for late-stage deity transformation cultivators. If consumed at the mid-stage, its overwhelming potency could pose considerable danger. Han Li closed his eyes and carefully considered the methods of usage, refinement, and dosage of these medicines. After a moment, he opened his eyes and turned his attention to the boxes and bottles on the table. As the shopkeeper had stated, nearly half of the required materials were missing. The spirit blood of the toad was clearly not among them. Han Li stroked his chin and asked, can the missing ingredients be purchased at other shops? Since the true blue-eyed toad is an ancient beast of the wilderness, it should not be easy to obtain. The shopkeeper replied respectfully, the materials for the clear jade pill do not strictly require herbs of the exact maturation. Even younger plants can be used, though the effectiveness will be reduced. As long as Senior has sufficient spirit stones, they can be acquired. As for the toad spirit blood, it is an extremely rare item. Although it appears occasionally on the market, it is usually purchased immediately. It is one of the most sought-after materials in large medicine stores, so obtaining it will not be easy. However, there will soon be an auction where it may appear. I see. In that case, I will take these items. After a brief moment of consideration, Han Li nodded. Many thanks for your patronage, Senior. I will calculate the cost. The 2 pill formulas come to 100,000 spirit stones. The 3 stalks of 5,000-year gold herb are... The shopkeeper smiled and quickly began listing the prices of each item. Han Li merely narrowed his eyes as he listened, his expression unchanged. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Han Li calmly left the medicine store and entered another nearby shop. He proceeded to walk through the surrounding medicine stores as if intending to visit everyone along the street. In these other shops, Han Li discovered 8 additional useful pill formulas. However, the materials required for them were even more difficult to obtain than the spirit blood of the true blue-eyed toad. As a result, he could only set them aside for now. If he were ever able to gather the necessary ingredients, he would not hesitate to spend whatever was required. However, instead of purchasing expensive, fully matured materials, he chose to acquire seeds or young plants. This approach allowed him to accumulate large quantities of materials without exhausting his resources. In this way, he managed to obtain all the medicinal herbs needed for the clear jade pill, along with additional reserves. Once he used spirit liquid to accelerate their maturation, he would be able to begin refining the pills. Naturally, refining medicine suitable for deity transformation cultivators was not an easy task. Given his current level of skill, it would likely take multiple attempts to successfully produce a single pill. However, with the small bottle in his possession, he effectively had unlimited opportunities. This removed any concern. As for the true toad liquid, it remained something he needed. He would have to acquire it at the upcoming auction. Han Li felt a faint sense of unease. Before attending the auction, he would first need to obtain more spirit stones. His current reserves were insufficient, so he would have to exchange for more. In the spirit realm, spirit stones were abundant, which caused the prices of items to be several times higher than in the mortal realm. Even so, no matter how many spirit stones one possessed in the mortal world, it would still be impossible to acquire the materials required for deity transformation stage pills. Han Li was confident that with a sufficient supply of medicinal pills, advancing one stage would not be a problem. Having reached this conclusion, he quietly moved into a secluded corner of the street. He glanced around to ensure no one was watching. Then a series of cracking sounds echoed from his body as his appearance shifted. In a short moment, he transformed into a large man with a purple face. Afterward, Han Li walked steadily into a large store known as the Revival Hall. In the markets of the spirit realm, 1,000-year spirit medicines were not as rare as in the mortal realm. However, when Han Li presented several stalks of herbs that had matured for 8,000 years, the shopkeeper immediately exchanged them for an enormous amount of spirit stones without hesitation. Han Li collected the spirit stones and promptly left. He avoided staying in any one place for too long to prevent drawing attention. Rather than leaving the city, he continued walking through several streets, observing the various magic tools, treasures, materials, and talismans available for sale. Through this, he gained considerable insight. It was evident that the spirit realm was rich in resources. The quality and power of the treasures here far surpassed those of the mortal realm. Even ordinary large stores offered remarkable spirit treasures. As for talismans and secret seals, they were even more extraordinary, exceeding anything found in the mortal world. Among them were several talismans inscribed with silver runes. Most of these talismans were either supportive or defensive in nature, with very few designed for offense. The few offensive ones he encountered were priced astonishingly high. However, there was a particular type of talisman with a faint silver silhouette that drew his attention. Hanley inquired about them at several stores and learned that they originated from the Heaven Spirit region. These silver rune talismans were known as puppet talismans. When activated, they could summon a puppet phantom inscribed within the talisman. The strength and abilities of the puppet depended on both the quality of the refinement and the skill of the user. It was said that the finest puppet talismans could even replicate the user's cultivation level and techniques. They were highly practical tools. After learning this, Han Li's thoughts stirred and he recalled the damaged jade book fragments in his possession. The talisman techniques recorded within it also mentioned the method for refining puppet talismans, though he had not yet studied it in detail. Given the high market value of these talismans, he decided it would be worthwhile to examine them carefully. With this in mind, Han Li deliberately sought out 2 talisman shops and purchased a large quantity of materials needed to refine silver rune talismans. Once finished, he calmly made his way toward the auction venue, the profound Zenith Hall, where humans and demons conducted trade. Although the auction would not begin for another 2 days, he intended to observe the transactions taking place among the demon race. After all, demon clans did not participate in human auctions. To prevent conflicts within the hall, human cultivators wishing to trade were required to wear a palm-sized jade pendant. As long as the pendant was worn, it would envelop the user in a layer of white mist, concealing their identity and suppressing their cultivation aura. Furthermore, if anyone attempted to use magic power within the hall, the Grand Formation would both restrain them and teleport them outside, temporarily barring re-entry. On the demon side, a black banner was used to shroud them in demonic clouds, similarly concealing their appearance. Additionally, 4 gold-armored guards at the spatial tempering stage stood watch, accompanied by 10 dark azure guards maintaining order on each side. With such measures in place, disturbances were effectively prevented. To enter, Han Li paid a considerable number of spirit stones. He accepted a jade pendant from the guard and fastened it at his waist. A layer of white mist immediately surrounded him. He then walked down a long corridor and passed through a large gate. He arrived in a vast hall over 1 kilometer in length, with another identical gate visible on the opposite side. Within the hall were more than 100 clusters of white and black mist, each representing a human or demon cultivator. About 30 of them sat cross-legged on the ground, with various items laid out before them. All remained silent. Most individuals stood near the stalls, carefully examining the goods, or quietly negotiating with the vendors. Occasionally, indistinct figures moved swiftly through the hall. From time to time, some would retreat to secluded corners to conduct private discussions. Han Li remained where he stood for a moment, surveying the surroundings. Then, without a word, he walked toward a nearby stall. The vendor was concealed within silver mist, indicating he was human. In front of him were 2 unusual items. One was a faint green object resembling a branch. The other was a sparkling crimson stone, roughly the size of a fist. Han Li carefully examined the displayed items, sweeping his spiritual sense across them one by one. The branch contained only a trace amount of wood attribute spiritual qi, yet it held a concentrated lightning force, as if it had been condensed directly from lightning itself. This immediately drew his attention. The sight reminded him of the heaven lightning bamboo. However, even 10,000-year-old golden lightning bamboo would not possess such overwhelming lightning power. Its divine devilbane lightning was typically restrained and controlled. As for the crimson gem, it emitted a faint fishy odor resembling the inner core of some beast. Yet its exact origin remained unclear to him. Han Li observed it for a moment with mild interest, then quietly moved on to another vendor's stall. Soon he arrived at a demon vendor's booth where several head-sized chunks of black ore emitted a chilling aura. Hanley continued walking slowly through the hall, observing the items on display. From time to time, he would pause to inspect something more closely. Throughout the entire process, he did not speak a single word, as if the vendors did not exist. Before long, he had surveyed everything in the hall, but a trace of disappointment appeared in his mind. Although the items were rare, none of them truly attracted him. Most of these materials had been gathered from the wilderness. Many were unfamiliar and likely only useful to a limited group of cultivators. Hanley glanced around the hall. Just as he was considering whether to leave, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching from behind. The white mist around him stirred slightly. He turned abruptly. The footsteps immediately stopped, as if the other party had been startled by his reaction. The newcomer was a demon cultivator, their figure shrouded in black qi. Their body appeared slender as they observed Han Li. Both of them were concealed by secret techniques. Aside from a vague outline, nothing else could be seen clearly. "Do you need something?" Han Li asked calmly. "Did you fail to find anything suitable, fellow Taoist?" A gentle female voice came from within the black mist. "That's correct. Nothing here caught my interest. Why do you ask? It seems this is your first time at the profound Zenith Hall. In truth, the truly valuable items are rarely displayed openly. They are usually exchanged in private," the woman replied in a steady tone. "I see. But wouldn't displaying them openly make it easier to find suitable buyers?" Hanley asked, frowning slightly. "Either you truly don't understand, or you are pretending not to. Even with concealment pendants and banners, it is still possible to discern certain details. Moreover, some items are sensitive in nature and are not meant to be widely known. That's enough. Do you have anything you wish to trade?" Her tone turned colder, hinting at impatience. "So long as you have suitable items, I am willing to trade. However, I would like to know why you approached me," Han Li replied. "It's simple," the woman said indifferently. "When you were examining the stalls, I could tell you were likely new to Deep Heaven City. Although our cultivation is restricted here upon closer observation, I judged you to be a deity transformation cultivator. That makes you a suitable trading partner. You are not the first person I have approached. Now show me what you have that might interest a demon. In addition to my own items, I am holding goods entrusted to me by others. Take out everything of value." Hearing this, Han Li smiled faintly. "I do have a few items suitable for demons. But I would like to see your goods first." The woman gave a cold chuckle. "I have spirit medicines, materials, as well as a few human magic and ancient treasures. What are you looking for?" Hanley thought briefly before replying, "I am not interested in finished items. I am looking for materials. Do you have any true toad spirit blood? I need it." The woman paused, then immediately shook her head. "True toad spirit blood. You chose well. That substance is valuable to both humans and demons. No one would sell it here. In that case, do you have 5,000-year-old gold grass and—" Hanley continued calmly listing several materials missing from his pill formulas. As she listened, the woman's expression grew increasingly displeased. When he finished, she said coldly, "You're being unrealistic. Those materials are used for cultivation advancement pills. They all come from the wilderness, and even our demon clan lacks them. There is no way we would trade such items to humans." Hanley showed no disappointment. "There's no need to refuse so quickly. I do not require herbs of the exact age. Saplings or seeds will suffice. I am willing to trade at a fair price." The woman hesitated, then replied with uncertainty, "That might be possible, but it will be troublesome. I do not have any of those items at the moment. Let me see what you are offering first. As long as you can gather them, we can trade the next time I come," Han Li said calmly. "That depends on what you can offer. Even seeds and saplings are not easy to obtain despite their limited demand. And I have no interest in spirit stones, even high-grade ones," the woman said with a proud tone. Han Li's expression remained unchanged as he transmitted a message to her. "What? You have 10,000-year-old spirit herbs?" The woman trembled slightly within the mist, her voice filled with surprise. Han Li smiled faintly. "If you can gather the materials I need, I will provide them." Her initial excitement quickly gave way to suspicion. Why not refine them into pills yourself? Why trade them? There is no need to inquire about my situation. If you find the arrangement acceptable, focus on gathering the materials. When I return, we will complete the exchange. For now, consider this a deposit. As he spoke, Han Li brushed his storage bracelet and took out a half-foot-long wooden box, handing it to her casually. The woman was momentarily stunned, but instinctively reached out to take it. Her expression shifted as she sent her spiritual sense into the box through a slight opening. She let out a soft exclamation and stared at the contents. Then she slowly opened the lid, her expression turning serious. "You intend to use this as a deposit? Are you not afraid I will take it and disappear?" she asked coldly. "This is merely a 3,000-year-old herb. With your status, you would not act in such a manner. Consider it a gesture of sincerity. If you bring me the required materials, I will ensure you are well compensated," Han Li replied calmly. The woman put the box away with a flick of her hand. Then she said confidently, "You seem sincere. However, the items you want cannot be gathered quickly. It will take several years to collect them." "Very well. I will wait for your news," Han Li said, cupping his hands politely. To him, a few thousand-year-old herb was insignificant. It was a small price to establish trust. Moreover, he was confident that the promise of 10,000-year-old herbs would motivate her to act. Since he did not wish to draw attention on the human side of the city, this method suited him. The woman nodded and left without another word. Han Li narrowed his eyes, watching her slender figure fade into the black mist. Then he turned and began walking toward the exit on the human side. However, as he passed the first human vendor, his gaze was drawn once more to the branch. He paused unconsciously. After a brief hesitation, he stepped closer. "Can you tell me where this came from?" Han Li asked, picking up the green branch and lightly stroking it. "The origin. I witnessed heavenly lightning strike a piece of dried spirit wood. Afterwards, it revived and became this. I do not know its exact origin or use," an old hoarse voice replied from within the white mist. Han Li turned the branch over several times and murmured, "Heavenly lightning transforming wood. That is indeed unusual." "Ha ha, quite rare," the old man said with a chuckle. "But I will be honest with you. This item contains extremely powerful lightning energy. Even if you refine it by force, it cannot be used in artifact forging. I originally intended to sell it to demons, but it seems you are interested as well." "Oh, it's nothing significant. I merely cultivated a trace of lightning, so I became curious about this item." Han Li idly turned the lightning branch in his hand and calmly asked, "What do you intend to exchange it for?" Upon hearing that Han Li was considering purchasing it, the old man was visibly startled. He gave Han Li a careful appraising look before speaking in a hoarse voice. "I have yet to determine a practical use for this lightning wood, so its value is difficult to judge. However, it is formed from lightning itself. How about this? Recently, I have been attempting to refine a sky essence pill, but I lack a 5,000-year-old medicinal herb. If you can provide one, the wood will be yours. Of course, I would also accept top-grade spirit stones if you have them." "How did you know I possess medicinal herbs?" Han Li's heart trembled slightly, and his expression behind the white mist darkened. "There is no need for alarm," the old man said softly. "I have cultivated a minor ability that greatly enhances my sense of smell. When you traded with that demon woman earlier, I detected a medicinal scent from the wooden box you carried. It belonged to a 3,000-year-old herb. If you can produce such an item so casually, it is reasonable to assume you may also possess a 5,000-year-old herb." Han Li was momentarily speechless. He had heard that certain grand Buddhist techniques could greatly strengthen a cultivator's 5 senses. Legends spoke of vision spanning vast distances, flawless hearing, and penetrating sight like his own bright sight spirit eyes. Judging from the old man's words, his ability had likely reached a realm rarely mentioned outside of rumors. After realizing this, Han Li's expression eased. He spoke slowly. "That is correct. Since you have already perceived it, I do possess such a herb. Take a look and see if it suits your needs." Han Li had no intention of bargaining. With a flick of his sleeve, white light flashed, and a narrow wooden box appeared in his hand before he tossed it toward the old man. The old man was surprised. He had not expected Han Li to agree so readily. With clear satisfaction, he accepted the box, opened it for a brief glance, and then quickly closed it again. Excellent. A genuine 5,000-year-old spirit herb. This will suffice, the old man said with evident pleasure. Han Li gave a faint smile. His hand blurred as he stored the lightning branch, then he cupped his fists in a polite gesture and silently departed. When dealing with experienced and cunning individuals, fewer words were always better. After leaving the hall, Han Li wandered through the marketplace once more. However, with his existing spirit treasures and abundant medicinal herbs, there was little that could attract his interest. Several hours later, he returned to the massive stone pagoda. Upon entering his squad's secluded chamber, Han Li waved his hand and struck the door with a spell seal, ensuring that he would not be disturbed. Even so, he remained cautious. Raising his hand, he released several streaks of differently colored light which vanished into the corners of the room. He then formed a spell seal with both hands, and a white barrier of light spread across the walls, completely concealing him from outside perception. Only then did Han Li sit down on the meditation mat and retrieve the half-foot-long lightning branch. It was only about as thick as a thumb, yet its color was an unusually vivid green. Fine vortex-like patterns covered its surface, though upon closer inspection they resembled flickering flames. He had not examined the branch carefully while inside the profound Zenith hall. Now he slowly brushed his fingers across its surface inch by inch before closing his eyes. Beneath the surface of the wood, it was filled with violent lightning energy. That such power could exist in a stable, solid form was difficult to comprehend. After pondering for a moment, he opened his eyes again. Azure light flickered in his palm as he injected a strand of spiritual power into the branch. The branch trembled slightly, and the energy was immediately repelled, returning to him. A trace of surprise appeared in Han Li's eyes. He increased the force of his magic power and tried again. This time the branch emitted a faint tremor, and a layer of white light appeared on its surface, clashing directly with the azure light from Han Li's hand. The two energies were completely incompatible. After a short moment, a low humming sound emerged from the light. Han Li frowned and withdrew his hand, dispersing the azure glow. It was evident that if he continued to force energy into the branch, it might detonate. However, with his experience, he had other methods of investigation. He grasped the branch and released several arcs of golden lightning onto it. The lightning coursed along the markings on the branch, yet remained completely motionless. Han Li did not feel discouraged. If this object were easy to analyze, its previous owner would not have sold it so cheaply. He then tossed the branch into the air where it hovered in place. With a flick of his finger, a streak of golden swordlight shot forth and struck the center of the branch. A deep thunderclap sounded. White light flashed outward, and the branch was cleanly split into two halves, which gently fell to the ground. Han Li reached out and drew the two halves back into his hand. Sweeping his gaze over them, he noticed a faint silver glow emanating from the split surfaces. His eyes shone with blue light as he examined them closely. He soon discovered that the so-called silver glow was actually formed from countless extremely fine arcs of lightning, woven together in intricate patterns. The structure was astonishingly complex. Without his spirit eyes, he would not have been able to perceive it at all. In the blink of an eye, a layer of green wood formed over the cut surfaces, restoring the branch into two independent pieces. Han Li was genuinely shocked. He had always considered his own ability to control and condense lightning to be refined. Yet compared to this, it was crude. The level of detail and precision here far exceeded anything he had achieved. It was countless times more complex than his lightning nets, or condensed spheres of divine devilbane lightning methods, that already demanded exceptional control of his spiritual sense. Holding the branches, Han Li lowered his head and fell into deep thought. Suddenly his gaze sharpened. With a flick of his finger, he struck one of the branches again. Golden light flashed and it split once more. This time Han Li was prepared. His spiritual sense surged forward as he focused on the newly exposed silver surface. Blue light radiated from his eyes as he observed it intently. However, the pattern revealed this time was entirely different from before. Moments later, the surface was once again sealed by a layer of green wood. Han Li slowly closed his eyes, contemplating what he had seen. Then, without hesitation, he split another section of the branch. Once again, a completely different lightning pattern appeared, and he studied it with full concentration. Soon, one half of the branch had been divided into countless small fragments scattered across the ground. As understanding began to form in his expression, Han Li released a thin streak of sword light and cut through the center of the remaining half. In a flash of silver light, it split evenly. He examined it closely before releasing numerous streaks of golden light, slicing it into increasingly thinner pieces. Some fragments became as thin as paper. Even so, the lightning wood remained perfectly stable. It clearly contained an immense and tightly controlled reserve of lightning energy. Han Li flipped his hand and produced a white jade slip. Holding it, he began to record every pattern he had observed. After some time, he exhaled slowly. Even with his remarkable memory, the sheer number and complexity of the patterns made them difficult to retain without assistance. With that burden removed, he turned his full attention to comprehending the designs. For reasons he could not fully explain, the moment he observed those patterns, he felt an intuitive understanding. It seemed they were directly related to the formation of the lightning wood itself. He remained seated for an entire day, completely still, studying the patterns without interruption. At last, Han Li's eyes flickered. He raised a finger and flicked it forward. A sharp crack of lightning rang out. A streak of golden lightning shot forth, then instantly burst into countless fine arcs. He began chanting softly, his fingers moving rapidly. The arcs of lightning halted, then gradually gathered together, weaving into a strange and unfamiliar pattern that faintly resembled those within the branch. Just as the structure began to take shape, it suddenly collapsed. The woven lightning exploded like a firecracker and vanished. Han Li let out a quiet sigh. A trace of disappointment appeared on his face, though his eyes still held a clear excitement. His reasoning had been correct. The lightning pattern he attempted to recreate did indeed carry a faint and unusual power. Unfortunately, a minor error in its formation had caused it to collapse before he could fully examine it. Taking a deep breath, Han Li brought his hands together. A dense bolt of golden lightning surged forth with a low rumble. It split into countless fine arcs and then began to gather again, this time in far greater numbers, forming an even more intricate structure. Under the guidance of Han Li's spiritual sense, the threads of lightning continued to interweave, gradually forming the structure of a branch. However, this level of control proved exceedingly difficult. Even with his powerful spiritual sense and the assistance of his bright sight spirit eyes, he failed repeatedly, each attempt ending in a violent discharge. Only after 8 attempts did the golden lightning threads finally stabilize, forming a complete piece that hovered motionlessly in mid-air. The finished object was about the size of a palm, its surface woven with intricate lightning patterns that were both striking and enigmatic. When Han Li saw it, his expression shifted slightly. He raised his hand and drew the cloth into his grasp. It felt exceptionally soft, its surface smooth and refined. In fact, it was even more delicate than silk. Even under the scrutiny of his bright sight spirit eyes, he could not detect anything unusual. He gently stroked the golden cloth and examined it further. A faint flicker passed through his gaze before he tossed it upward and formed a spell seal with one hand. The cloth immediately transformed into a streak of golden light circling around him as faint rolls of thunder echoed. Then inch by inch the cloth dispersed, revealing a hollow projection of lightning patterns glowing faintly in gold. As this translucent pattern emerged, an immense spiritual pressure burst forth. This was the same mysterious power he had sensed from the branch earlier. Han Li narrowed his eyes and stared intently at the golden pattern. A trace of excitement arose within him, although he still could not fully control these lightning patterns. Their spiritual power was more than 10 times stronger than that of cloth woven from divine devil-bane lightning. If used in an attack, even the protective restrictions of the stone chamber might not withstand it. With this thought, Han Li made a beckoning gesture toward the lightning pattern. A clap of thunder sounded as the pattern flashed, reverting back into its cloth form and falling into his hand. Shortly afterward, he opened his mouth and released more lightning once again, attempting to weave it into a new form. After several more failures, he finally succeeded. This time the result was not a cloth, but a shimmering golden sphere, its surface faintly illuminated by lightning patterns. Han Li grasped it and carefully examined both items with his spiritual sense. After a brief moment, he seemed to recall something. He opened his mouth and expelled a ball of silver flames. He pointed toward it with an incantation gesture. With a soft explosion, the flame burst apart into countless silver blossoms. Han Li chanted quietly, using his spiritual sense to reshape the flames into fine threads. A similar process unfolded, but halfway through the weaving, the flame suddenly erupted again, reverting into a silver fireball. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. With another command, the fireball transformed into a bird and flew back into his body. Afterward, he condensed strands of blue spiritual power and attempted the same process. However, the result was no different from before. The attempt ended in failure. Han Li did not continue experimenting. Instead, he fell into deep contemplation. Although both lightning constructs were formed using the same underlying principles, their finer details differed significantly. The lightning within the cloth was stable and pure, while the lightning within the golden sphere was restless and volatile, as if it could erupt at any moment. As he handled the two items, he pondered carefully. After some time, a faint smile appeared on his face. Based on his deductions, these lightning patterns were likely a type of naturally formed talisman characters. Each pattern possessed unique properties, similar to the talisman characters derived from the immortal clan's silver runes. However, the precise effects and methods of using these patterns were not something he could fully comprehend in a short time. With that conclusion, Han Li placed both lightning items into a jade box. He then sealed it carefully with several restriction talismans before storing it in his storage bracelet. For the remainder of the time before the auction, he withdrew his spiritual sense and quietly meditated with his eyes closed. On the morning of the third day, Han Li opened his eyes. He removed the restrictions of the secluded chamber and stepped outside. As he exited, he habitually released his spiritual sense, sweeping it across the entire hall without conscious thought. At that moment, he heard a voice. He turned his head slightly and frowned. Without making any sound, he walked toward the main hall. Before he had fully stepped out, a man's voice rang out in loud laughter. "Fairy Shu, if you cannot bear to lose, then you should not have made the wager in the first place. Did you not agree to become my disciple's wife?" The laughter was harsh and grating, like the clanging of a broken gong. Han Li stepped forward calmly, his gaze sweeping across the hall. He saw two groups confronting each other. On one side stood a man and a woman. The woman was Fairy Shu, her face pale and devoid of color. Beside her stood the large green-eyed man, whose expression was equally unpleasant. Opposing them were two men dressed in black robes. One had a thin face and long triangular eyes clad in dark azure armor. The other was a pockmarked middle-aged dwarf with sickly thinning hair. The laughter had come from the dwarf. Senior Han. As soon as Han Li appeared, the large man noticed him and hurriedly saluted, relief clearly visible on his face. Fairy Shu also showed obvious joy upon seeing him. Han Li halted his steps. Numerous thoughts flashed through his mind, yet his expression remained calm. The dwarf's laughter ceased abruptly. He examined Han Li with a hint of surprise. "So you must be the newly arrived fellow Taoist Han." At nearly the same moment, Han Li swept his spiritual sense across the old man, discovering that he was a mid-deity transformation cultivator. A slight furrow appeared on his brow. "Who are you, and why are you causing a disturbance here?" Han Li asked coldly. The dwarf's expression darkened at Han Li's tone. His cultivation was higher, yet he was being addressed so bluntly. However, recalling that Han Li was an ascended cultivator, He suppressed his anger and forced a smile. I am Huang Bao, leader of the 27th Squad. I came here to discuss a matter with Fairy Shu. It would be best if you did not interfere. I have nothing to discuss with you, Fairy Shu said through clenched teeth. This concerns only your disciple. Senior should not interfere and escalate matters unnecessarily. Huang Bao let out a cold laugh. What? Did you not fail to keep an appointment with my disciple? Since you remained silent, he had no choice but to seek assistance. If you have the ability, you may also seek help. Otherwise, disaster will fall upon your Zhu clan. My affairs have nothing to do with the Zhu clan. Senior must not involve the innocent Fairy Shu replied, unable to hide her anger. Huang Bao sneered. How are they unrelated? The moment you made your agreement with my disciple, the Shu clan became witnesses. If you refuse to honor it, I will naturally seek out those witnesses. Fairy Shu's face turned even paler. She glanced toward Han Li. Though she said nothing, her plea was unmistakable. The green-eyed man beside her could only show a helpless expression. Han Li lightly touched his nose and asked calmly, "What was the agreement?" In truth, if not for her being a descendant of Fairy Ice Soul, as well as their prior acquaintance, he would not have bothered to ask. By asking this question, he had already revealed his intention to intervene. Huang Bao's expression shifted slightly. The dwarf rolled his eyes and chuckled. It is quite simple. I wish to marry Fairy Shu. Her ice crystal sword possesses extreme cold. She agreed that if my treasure could withstand a strike from her sword without freezing, she would consent to the marriage. I have already succeeded, yet she now seeks to go back on her word and has hidden here. Is that true? Han Li asked. It is true, Fairy Shu replied, her expression filled with anger. But my magic treasure was tampered with. Otherwise, an early-stage cultivator like him could never have withstood my attack. As she spoke, her gaze involuntarily shifted toward Huang Bao. Though Huang Bao said nothing, a trace of smugness appeared in his eyes. Regardless of the circumstances, your ice crystal sword failed to freeze my green wave blade, the dwarf said with a grin. You must now fulfill your promise. Fairy Shu remained silent, her expression icy. A cold glint flashed in Han Li's eyes as he spoke in a firm tone. So that is the situation. However, I do not believe your treasure can withstand her ice crystal sword. Demonstrate it here and now. If it is true, I will not interfere. But if it is not, the two of you must leave. This is the residence of the 56th Squad, not the 27th. Senior One. Very well, let it be so. I hope fellow Taoist Han will remember his words. Fairy Shu was shocked and tried to speak, but Huang Bao agreed immediately, his expression filled with satisfaction. Given Han Li's status as an ascended cultivator, he did not wish to provoke unnecessary conflict. The dwarf then spat out a green flying sword which circled before him. A sinister smile spread across his face. The sword shone with dazzling light, clearly no ordinary treasure. Han Li narrowed his eyes. Blue light flickered within them as he carefully examined the sword. He immediately saw through its exterior. This so-called green wave blade contained two entirely different levels of spiritual power. One weak, the other exceptionally strong. It was evident that the treasure had been tampered with. Under the watch of many onlookers, Fairy Shu felt a trace of unease. Even so, she raised her sleeve and released a streak of white light. It circled above her, then revealed a crystalline flying sword. This was her bonded magic treasure, the ice crystal sword. In truth, she felt rather helpless. Even though some adjustments had been made to the green wave sword, she had only been given a short time to refine the myriad-year profound jade into her own sword. Although this process significantly enhanced its power and gave it a chance to seal the opposing blade in ice, the time constraint still weighed heavily on her. After summoning her sword, she did not dare to attack immediately. Instead, she hesitated and glanced toward Han Li. Han Li briefly observed both flying swords. Then he raised his hand and reached toward one of them. At once, Fairy Shu felt her sword tremble violently. It broke free from her control and flew directly into Han Li's grasp. He caught the hilt and lightly flicked the blade with his finger. A clear, resonant sound rang out resembling the cry of a phoenix. The tone was pure and refined, almost celestial. The old man nearby sneered. At their level, cultivators could indeed use secret techniques to temporarily enhance the power of their own magic treasures. However, applying such enhancement to another's treasure was extremely difficult. Differences in spiritual power and technique would naturally clash, making fusion unstable. When he had strengthened his disciple's magic treasure, he had relied on a rare and profound spirit talisman. Even then, it had taken him half a month of refinement to achieve its current power. Hanli, however, was only at the early stage of deity transformation. The old man did not believe he could surpass that level of enhancement in an instant. Moreover, sealing the green wave sword in ice required power of a comparable ice attribute. That alone imposed a severe limitation. With these thoughts passing through his mind, the old man felt no concern over Hanli's actions. "A fine sword," Hanli said calmly, as if he had already seen through the old man's reasoning. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips. At that moment, a silver flame emerged from the sword's hilt. In the blink of an eye, it spread across the blade and seeped into it. The crystalline sword immediately turned silver white. On its surface, the image of a flame bird appeared vivid and lifelike, as though it had always been part of the sword. Hanli had forcefully infused the ice crystal sword with his spirit-devouring flame. Triggering this unusual transformation, the spirit-devouring flame was an extraordinary force capable of consuming spiritual power. Formed from both great yin true flame and pure sun flame essence, it could alternate between extreme cold and extreme heat. Because of this dual nature, it merged seamlessly with the flying sword. The old man's eyes widened briefly, then narrowed. The surrounding cultivators were equally shocked. With a casual motion, Hanli tossed the sword back into the air. Fairy Shu quickly formed a hand seal, her face filled with relief, and regained control of the sword. She immediately began chanting, repeatedly striking the blade with her fingers and pouring all of her magic power into it. The sword responded with a continuous hum, trembling as a layer of silver flame spread across its surface. In an instant, it transformed into a 3-meter-long silver flame bird. As soon as the bird appeared, the temperature throughout the hall dropped sharply. A thin layer of frost began to form across the ground, gleaming faintly. With a soft shout, Fairy Shu directed the flame bird forward. It flapped its wings and rushed toward the green flying sword. Seeing the sudden increase in the ice crystal sword's power, the dwarf's expression tightened with fear. He clenched his teeth, formed a hand seal, and commanded his own treasure. The green sword shone brightly, its form blurring before transforming into a horned green worm that charged forward with force. A loud explosion echoed through the hall. The green worm and the silver flame bird collided, intertwining green light with silver flames. The bird opened its beak and tore away half of the worm's body, devouring it completely. The dwarf let out a shout and spat a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock. Another loud sound followed as the flame bird burst apart, turning into a dense silver ice mist that enveloped the damaged worm. Under the glow of silver light, a sharp cracking sound rang out. A massive block of ice 30 meters in size formed in mid-air. The worm cried out within the ice before disappearing, leaving only a dimly glowing flying sword trapped inside. At that moment, unnoticed by all, a thin thread of silver light shot from the mist and silently entered the green wave sword. A strange scene followed. Although the dwarf stood over 60 meters away from his magic treasure, the instant the sword was frozen, his body collapsed to the ground as if he had fainted. This was one of the terrifying properties of the spirit-devouring flame. Even spatial tempering cultivators would find it difficult to guard against such an ability. For a nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure, even if enhanced, it was utterly defenseless. It had been defeated in a single exchange. Fairy Shu, seeing the result, waved her hand with clear delight. The silver ice mist condensed once more into a flying sword and returned to her side. As it did, a small cluster of silver flame separated from the blade and flew back toward Hanli, disappearing into his body. Meanwhile, Huang Bao finally recovered from his shock. His face twisted with anger as he rushed to his disciple's side. Upon inspection, he discovered a layer of frost covering the dwarf's body. His complexion had turned a deep blue as if frozen to death. His soul has been frozen within his body. Huang Bao exclaimed, his expression filled with alarm. However, as a deity transformation cultivator, he reacted quickly. With a sweep of his sleeve, he released a streak of red light toward the massive ice block. The light wrapped around it and flames surged into the ice. The temperature in the hall rose rapidly. The ice melted almost instantly, and the green flying sword regained its freedom. Immediately returning to the dwarf's body, Han Li observed all of this with a calm, indifferent expression. To conceal the true power of the spirit-devouring flame, he had deliberately suppressed its strength, allowing the ice crystal sword itself to perform the freezing. Otherwise, as a heavenly flame, the ice it produced would not have been so easily melted. Even so, he had revealed enough strength to deter further trouble. Earlier, he had directed a trace of the flame's extreme cold into the flying sword. Through the dwarf's spiritual connection with his treasure, the cold had invaded his body directly. The ability to freeze the soul and affect the body was something Han Li had only recently mastered. From his prior research, he knew that such techniques were rare and typically associated with legendary glacial flames. Its effectiveness was now evident. In Huang Bao's eyes, Han Li had become an unfathomable figure. He quickly took out a fire-red medicinal pill and placed it into the dwarf's mouth. As the blue hue faded from his disciple's face, he let out a quiet breath of relief. Then he turned to Han Li, his expression uncertain. After a brief pause, he forced a smile, cupped his hands, and said, "Brother Han's abilities are formidable. I concede defeat. My disciple will abandon the matter of marriage. We will take our leave." With that, he carried the dwarf out of the hall. Han Li returned the gesture, but said nothing further. Once the two had completely departed, his expression grew slightly cold. Before Fairy Shu could speak, he asked in a low voice, "Who were they?" Fairy Shu was momentarily startled. Before she could respond, the green-eyed man stepped forward and said, "Please rest assured, Senior Han. Huang Bao and his disciple belong to a minor sect called Quicksand Valley. It is not an ancient or powerful sect. Huang Bao himself is their strongest cultivator." "I see. Then there is no need to worry about further complications," Han Li replied. He turned to Fairy Shu and added, "This is the only time I will intervene on your behalf. If trouble arises again, you must handle it yourself." Fairy Shu's heart sank, but she bowed respectfully. "This junior understands. Many thanks for your assistance, Senior. I will not trouble you again." Han Li gave a slight nod, then left the hall without hesitation and flew away. Watching him depart, the green-eyed man let out a wry smile. That silver flame possessed extreme cold and could freeze the soul directly. Yet it does not resemble any of the legendary glacial flames. Fellow Taoist, Shu Senior Han seems to have some connection to you. Do you know what kind of flame that was? Fairy Shu sighed softly. Senior Han has a faint connection to my ancestor, but this is the first time I have encountered such a flame. During patrol, he once used it to completely consume a fused beastman. Its power is not surprising, but he clearly does not wish others to know too much about him. Brother Zhou, it would be best if you remain silent about this. The man's expression changed slightly. He nodded in agreement. At that moment, Han Li was already flying toward the market in a streak of azure light. According to the information he had gathered, the auction was set to begin at noon. By the time he arrived, it would be just in time. When Han Li arrived, it was close to noon. In a brief moment, he used a secret technique to alter his appearance, turning into a large man with a long beard, and entered the profound Zenith Hall. At the entrance, several cultivators were already enhancing spirit stones to activate concealment pendants before entering. All of them were at least at the deity transformation stage, and Han Li even noticed 3 spatial tempering cultivators among them. After a moment of consideration, he stepped forward as well and handed a pouch of spirit stones to the guard. The guard swept it with his spiritual sense, nodded, then passed him a jade pendant and opened the way. He added, "After you enter, head left." Han Li was slightly surprised upon hearing this, but he still walked in with some hesitation. Once inside the passage, he quickly discovered something unusual. The originally straight corridor had become twisted and split into two paths. It was as if the entire layout of the profound Zenith Hall had changed. Clearly, the restrictions within the hall had also been altered. Without dwelling on it, Han Li followed the guard's instructions and proceeded along the left path. Before long, he entered a dark passage and disappeared from sight. After the time it took to finish a meal, he arrived in a pitch-black stone chamber. The room was about 3 meters wide, enclosed on all sides, except for a wide opening. Inside there was a jade table, a bamboo chair, and another table holding a red spell plate. These stone rooms were densely arranged, floating in the air across a span of 300 meters. They were suspended chambers. The entire hall extended 3,000 meters in width, with nearly 1,000 such stone rooms hovering above. Faint azure talisman inscriptions glowed on the surfaces of the rooms. Each one was spaced at a moderate distance from the others, resembling floating lanterns. Han Li sat down on the chair, looked down at the auction area below, and clicked his tongue softly. The moment he entered the main hall, he had been caught in a strange formation and transported directly to this room. Upon closer inspection, he found that not only was the room suspended in the air, but it also blocked spiritual sense. Combined with the concealment pendant, this ensured complete anonymity for all bidders. It was evident that the organizer of the auction understood cultivators' fear of attracting envy and had put considerable effort into addressing it. Han Li leaned back and closed his eyes briefly to rest. Soon after, several hundred more cultivators entered the hall, nearly filling it completely. Han Li opened his eyes and drew a slow breath. Ordinarily, entry to such an auction required at least deity transformation cultivation. Yet this event had gathered nearly 1,000 such cultivators. Such a scene would have been unimaginable in the mortal realm. However, outside of Deep Heaven City, only the major cultivation cities across the 3 human regions could possibly host such a gathering. At that moment, a series of clear melodic chimes echoed through the hall. The large gate slowly closed with a heavy sound. The already dim hall sank into complete darkness. Soon after, several moonlight stones the size of human heads appeared above the auction platform. Their soft white glow spread across the hall, drawing everyone's gaze downward. On a platform about 30 meters tall, a formation suddenly activated. A flash of white light followed, and a white-robed old man appeared. The moment he showed himself, the cultivators stirred. Some even spoke his name in surprise. "Grandmaster Qi, why is he here? Could it be this auction?" "Oh," whispers spread throughout the hall. Hearing the reaction, Han Li's interest was piqued, and he carefully observed the old man. The man only had mid-deity transformation cultivation, yet his silver hair and calm, approachable expression gave him the bearing of a respected figure. Since others addressed him as Grandmaster, Han Li inferred that he must possess remarkable skill in pill refinement or another specialized art. The white-robed old man coughed lightly and spoke in a gentle tone. "It seems there is no need for introductions. Many of you already recognize me. Normally, I would not attend such an event, but several items in this auction were personally appraised by me. I also have a strong interest in them, so I took the initiative to act as host. I trust none of you object." Qilao must be joking. Having a master of refinement preside over the auction is exactly what we hope for. Indeed, with Brother Qi's personal appraisal, we can rest assured. Voices of approval echoed from the floating rooms. Although some cultivators remained silent, none voiced opposition. Clearly, the old man held considerable reputation. He continued to give everyone an overview. "I will briefly introduce the key items. There are 3 treasures of extraordinary value, rarely seen in the past several hundred years. Among them are top-grade materials from the wilderness, a spirit treasure ranked among the primal myriad spirit list, and finally, a complete set of cultivation arts left behind by a late-stage body integration senior one who once shook both the human and demon worlds. The cultivators were visibly shaken, as if they could not fully believe what they had heard. The hall fell into a brief silence. The wilderness material was uncertain in value, but a spirit treasure on the primal rankings and the primary cultivation art of a body integration cultivator were extremely rare. If such items appeared openly, they would undoubtedly trigger violent conflict. As their hearts pounded, the atmosphere grew heavy. Brother Chi, if such important items are present, why was this auction not announced in advance so we could prepare more spirit stones? Why keep it secret? A childlike voice asked from one of the rooms. The old man seemed prepared for this question. Smiling slightly, he replied, "Fellow Taoist, there is no need for concern. The secrecy was at the request of the owner of these three treasures, who is the same person. As for the reason, I do not know, but the auction honored the request. However, I can guarantee the authenticity of these items. Furthermore, although these treasures may have appeared on short notice, you may exchange items of equivalent value for them. The valuation will be set at 10% below the joint appraisal of 3 market grandmasters and myself. You may rest assured." Hearing this, the cultivators felt both surprise and relief. No further questions were raised. Seeing that there were no objections, Old Man Chi clapped his hands and announced the start of the auction. More than 10 streaks of colored light immediately flew onto the platform. As the light faded, 10 beautiful women in palace robes appeared behind him. Each had core formation cultivation and carried a box of varying size. Following convention, we begin with finished products, then move on to materials and techniques. The headline items will come last. The first item, 3 bottles of Bright Heart pills, used to enhance cultivation at the deity transformation stage. The starting price is 300,000 spirit stones, with increments of no less than 50,000. As he spoke, one of the women stepped forward, gracefully raised her hand and opened the box, revealing 3 small jade bottles. The old man waved his sleeve, drawing one bottle into his hand. He opened it with practiced ease and tilted it slightly, letting a pure white crystalline pill fall into his palm. A dense medicinal fragrance immediately spread. He held the pill between 2 fingers and displayed it. At that moment, an unusual phenomenon occurred. The pill emitted both azure and red light, shimmering like a gem. The medicinal aura in the air intensified several times over. I have demonstrated the characteristics of the Bright Heart pill. There should be no further doubt. You may begin bidding. 350,000, 400,000, 450,000. Soon 2 clusters of purple light, one large, one small, appeared above the platform, displaying the current bid and the room number of the bidder. From the very beginning, the price rose rapidly. Clearly, these deity transformation cultivators had strong demand for such items. This was expected. While the headline treasures were tempting, most cultivators knew they had little chance of obtaining them. It was more practical to secure smaller items while the wealthier participants focused elsewhere. Hanley had no interest in bidding. Once he returned, he could refine the clear jade pill himself, making such items unnecessary. He simply watched as the price climbed until the pills were sold for 600,000 spirit stones. At that moment, many shared Han Li's thinking to wait quietly for the 3 main treasures. In truth, Han Li had some interest in the spirit treasure and the wilderness materials, but he had no intention of competing for them. However, the primary cultivation art left behind by a late body integration cultivator greatly attracted him. Han Li's azure essence sword art had already been cultivated to its utmost limit. Although his other abilities were formidable, the divine essence-fused light only grew stronger in tandem with his cultivation. The heavenly spirit, devouring flame, likewise depended on the advancement of his physical body to increase its power. Neither of these could assist him in raising his cultivation stage. Without an appropriate cultivation technique to guide him, continuing to rely on medicinal pills would eventually cause his body to collapse under the pressure of excessive spiritual qi. At present, if Han Li wished to advance further, only 2 paths lay before him. The first was the conventional route taken by most cultivators to obtain another high-grade cultivation art and continue cultivating from there. However, abruptly switching to an unfamiliar technique midway was inherently problematic. If not handled with great care, it could conflict with his original art and result in diminished progress despite greater effort. The second path was far less common. It required studying the experiences of body refiners and attempting a rarely traveled route dual cultivation of magic, power and the physical body. For this, he would need to acquire a body refinement technique from a devilish sect or a demon clan. Such techniques, whether from devilish sects or demon clans, not only strengthened the body to an extraordinary degree, but also enhanced magical power. However, this method was exceedingly difficult and seldom practiced. Although some human cultivators had attempted it, very few had succeeded. By nature, the human body could not compare to that of elder devils or members of the demon clan. Once a human's physical body reached a certain level of strength, further advancement became nearly impossible, except for a rare few with exceptional talent. Yet if one could cultivate both aspects to their peak, the resulting power would be astonishing. Moreover, the likelihood of breaking through cultivation bottlenecks would far exceed that of ordinary cultivators at the same level. This left Han Li somewhat conflicted. Coincidentally, he already possessed a set of dual cultivation arts, the heaven-bearing devil art and the techniques recorded within the sacred provenance plate. He had previously verified that these two techniques were closely related to the bright jade arts. Each of the three could be cultivated independently and possessed distinct characteristics. Together, however, they formed a complete set of cultivation arts that could be practiced in sequence. If cultivated separately, the latter two techniques would lack a foundational base, and their effectiveness would be reduced to perhaps a tenth of their true potential. But if all three were cultivated together from the beginning, restoring the complete dual cultivation system, their full power could be realized. Although their origins lay in an immensely powerful devilish art from the true devil realm, subsequent refinements by human Buddhist sects, the devilish Tao and the demon clan, had fundamentally altered them. Cultivation no longer relied on true devil qi, but instead utilized worldly essence qi. While Han Li had reached this conclusion through his own analysis, in truth, no human cultivator had ever attempted such a method. When the bright jade arts of the Buddhist sect and the heaven-bearing devil art of the devil Tao were originally created, they were regarded as entirely separate systems. As for the sacred provenance plate, its techniques were a legacy passed down from a demon king of the mortal realm. Moreover, it was incomplete, missing two sections. It was difficult to assert that it truly matched the other two techniques. If he were to cultivate all three together, the potential risks were unknown. Nevertheless, it was beyond doubt that the sacred provenance plate represented a superior form of dual cultivation. Furthermore, his body, tempered through the bright jade arts, had already reached a level where he could contend with nascent soul cultivators using brute force alone. If he could successfully cultivate the remaining techniques, the extent of his strength was difficult to predict. Purely cultivating magic power and pursuing dual cultivation each had their own advantages and disadvantages. The former allowed for faster progress, was simpler to practice, and carried fewer risks. The latter was arduous and dangerous, but it promised overwhelming strength and greater potential for advancement. Because of this, Han Li remained undecided. He had long paid attention to high-grade cultivation techniques commonly available, but none had proven suitable. It was not that spatial tempering arts were unavailable on the market, but after experiencing the power of the divine essence-fused light and the heavenly spirit devouring flame, ordinary techniques no longer held any appeal for him. Now that he had heard that a set of late-body integration stage techniques would be auctioned, his interest was stirred. If that cultivation art proved suitable, he might abandon his uncertain path of dual cultivation altogether. As Han Li continued to deliberate, Old Man Qi proceeded with the auction of medicinal pills. Each item was sold at several times its initial price. Once all the pills had been auctioned, the female cultivators holding the boxes flew toward the winning bidders to exchange the items for spirit stones. Most of the pills, including the Bright Heart pill, were intended for early deity transformation cultivators. Only 2 were suitable for mid-stage deity transformation cultivators, and none were designed for those at the late stage. This was not surprising. Even within the spirit realm, where spiritual qi was dense and spiritual herbs abundant, the primary ingredients required for deity transformation stage pills were typically found in the wilderness. If such herbs could be cultivated artificially, they either required an excessive amount of time or were extremely difficult to nurture. As a result, deity transformation stage medicinal pills were inherently rare. Moreover, the success rate of refining such pills was extremely low. Even if someone managed to produce a late-stage pill, it would be kept for personal use rather than sold. Thus, even in Deep Heaven City, where pill refinement materials were plentiful early-stage deity transformation pills were already scarce, let alone those for the mid-stage. After the medicinal pill auction concluded, the old man waved his hand, and the women behind him brought forth another set of boxes. Upon opening them, they revealed jade containers of various designs. These were also medicinal items, but they were not intended to enhance cultivation. Instead, they were used for healing injuries or neutralizing poisons. A new round of bidding began. These items did not attract nearly as much interest. Although all were eventually sold, their prices were significantly lower than those of the previous round. For cultivators, cultivation-enhancing medicine was always in demand. In contrast, auxiliary medicines such as these were only prepared in limited quantities and were not subject to intense competition. Once this round concluded, the women retrieved wooden boxes sealed with restriction talismans from their storage bracelets. At that moment, the previously relaxed atmosphere in the hall became noticeably more animated. As the talismans were removed, dazzling lights emerged from within the boxes. There were common magic blades and sabers, as well as rarer items such as seals, medallions, mirrors, and other ancient treasures of unusual forms. The white-robed old man reached toward one of the boxes and summoned a bronze token into his hand. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the token into the air and formed a hand seal, striking it with a spell. The token spun rapidly before splitting into 3 hollow copies that shot outward. In an instant, they transformed into 3 massive pythons, one azure, one red, and one white, each over 20 meters long. They coiled in mid-air, exuding a formidable presence. Old Man Chi spoke calmly. Venomous python token, forged from 3 ancient snake-type beasts. It allows the user to control their manifested souls in battle. When used together, they are comparable to 3 nascent soul stage assistants, a rare and exceptional treasure. Starting bid 2 million spirit stones. Each increment 100,000. 2 million. Although 3 nascent soul assistants were not particularly significant to a deity transformation cultivator, they could prove useful in critical situations. 2,200,000. After a brief silence, bidding began. 2,300,000. Each treasure was auctioned in turn. After 2 rounds, spirit treasures were finally brought out. Their prices quickly rose to astonishing levels. Even though they were only low-grade spirit treasures, spatial tempering cultivators competed fiercely for them. Each spirit treasure could significantly increase their chances of surviving future tribulations. In previous auctions, such items would have been considered the highlight. However, a few spatial tempering cultivators remained indifferent, clearly reserving their resources for the final 3 items. Although ordinary spirit treasures were valuable, they were incomparable to divine spirit treasures listed on the Primal Myriad Spirit rankings. The gap in power was immense. If an opportunity arose to obtain such an item, no one would willingly let it slip away. Throughout all of this, Han Li did not participate in any bidding and remained quietly seated in his private room. Soon, rare materials and secret techniques were brought forth for auction. Han Li's attention sharpened immediately. Several rare items and a cultivation art were quickly sold. Then, when the white-robed old man announced a vial of true toad spirit blood, Han Li's expression changed. He had initially intended to bid, but upon hearing that the starting price was 1,500,000 spirit stones, his lips twitched slightly. This starting price far exceeded that of the previously auctioned materials. Before he could even consider how much to offer, a voice from a distant corner of the hall spoke lazily. 3 million spirit stones. At those words, Han Li's heart sank. The cultivators who had intended to bid fell silent, all turning their attention toward the source of the voice. However, due to the restrictions of the private rooms, nothing could be seen. True toad spirit blood was a key ingredient in refining true toad liquid, but a price of 3 million spirit stones far exceeded what most bidders were willing to pay. For a time, the entire hall fell into silence. Han Li frowned slightly, his gaze fixed on the auction stage. The white-robed old man held the vial in his hand, his expression uncertain. Han Li was fully capable of affording a price of 3 million spirit stones. Even though he possessed spirit herbs that could be sold for large sums, he would never release too many of them within a short period of time. Doing so would easily draw unwanted attention, and if someone discovered the source of his wealth, it would bring considerable trouble. The bidder who had just spoken clearly intended to secure the jar of true toad spirit blood at all costs. Even if Han Li raised the price to 3 million spirit stones, it might still not be enough, and it would only attract further scrutiny. Moreover, such a small quantity of spirit blood would merely allow him to familiarize himself with the refinement process of true toad liquid. It would not be sufficient to produce any meaningful amount of spirit medicine. After weighing these factors, Han Li calmly decided to withdraw from the bidding. His decision did not deter the others. Moments later, several more bids were placed in rapid succession. These bidders were evidently late deity transformation cultivators who urgently needed true toad liquid to overcome their bottlenecks. Ordinary cultivators would never be willing to pay such a staggering price. After a fierce round of competition, the jar of true toad spirit blood was ultimately secured by the first bidder for an astonishing 4 million spirit stones. Such a high price naturally drew widespread attention. Many cultivators cast subtle glances toward the stone cabin, attempting to identify the buyer. However, their efforts yielded no results. The auction continued. The next few items were equally rare, all of them essential ingredients for pill refinement at the spatial tempering stage. Although fewer people participated in the bidding, the final prices were even more shocking. Among them, a purple myriad-year primordial fruit was sold for nearly 10 million spirit stones. Those attending such an auction for the first time were left completely stunned. If mere ingredients could reach such prices, then the value of finished pills suitable for spatial tempering cultivators would be beyond imagination. Before long, all the ingredients and secret tomes were auctioned off. The white-robed elderly man waved his hand lightly, and the 10 female cultivators behind him withdrew from the platform. At the same time, 3 cultivators in different attire stepped forward. One was a woman in an azure dress, another a robust elderly man, and the third a refined middle-aged scholar. Their appearance caused a subtle stir throughout the hall. Han Li faintly heard the word appraiser and immediately understood their identities. These were the 3 appraisers mentioned earlier. Although their cultivation bases were only at the early deity transformation stage, their presence alone commanded attention, indicating that they were far from ordinary. As Han Li observed them, the white-robed elderly man greeted the trio politely before addressing the audience. Next are the 3 most valuable treasures of this auction, brought forth by fellow Taoist Han and the others. The first item consists of 3 scales from the true spirit black qilin of the primordial world. These scales can be used to refine the legendary true spirit water pill, or as top-grade materials for crafting water attribute spirit treasures. Treasures refined from these scales have a chance of appearing on the chaotic myriad spirit roll. As for the true spirit water pill, it can allow any early deity transformation cultivator to advance to the mid-stage upon consumption. Of course, regardless of the method chosen, the success rate remains low, even with a master refiner. However, if anyone acquires these scales and wishes to refine a spirit treasure, I will personally provide my services free of charge. With a faint chuckle, he stepped back behind the appraisers. The mention of the true spirit black qilin caused many cultivators to draw sharp breaths. They stared at the appraisers in silence. In contrast, the wealthier cultivators were visibly excited. Their decision to wait for the final items had clearly been correct. Regardless of the remaining treasures, these Qilin scales alone were worth bidding for with full effort. Most intended to use them to refine the true spirit water pill. Using them for spirit treasures seemed wasteful, and only those specializing in water attribute cultivation showed interest in that option. Han Li's heart stirred upon hearing about the true spirit water pill. This was a pill that defied natural order, capable of granting an immediate breakthrough. It was exactly what he had been searching for. Almost instantly, he made his decision. He would obtain these scales no matter the cost. Even if it required taking certain risks, it would be worthwhile. A resolute expression appeared on his face. At that moment, the middle-aged woman among the appraisers stepped forward. She brushed her storage bracelet, producing a translucent jade box about a foot in size. Runes shimmered across its surface, accompanied by faint pulses of white light, indicating that the box itself was no ordinary item. Without further introduction, she placed a finger on the box. The lid opened on its own. 3 streaks of black light shot out, rising into the air. The woman remained calm. With a simple grasping motion, an invisible force pulled the 3 streaks downward, trapping them. The black light dispersed, revealing 3 fist-sized black scales, which landed in her hand. She returned 2 of them to the box, sealed it with a talisman, and displayed the remaining scale. As you all know, the black Qilin is a water attribute true spirit. Its scales are the finest water attribute materials in existence, particularly suitable for those cultivating water-based arts. There are 2 ways to verify their authenticity. First, by examining the spiritual power within them. Even without refinement, these scales contain immense water attribute energy comparable to top-grade treasures. As she spoke, she infused spiritual power into the scale and waved it through the air. A flash of blue light appeared. A lotus-shaped projection bloomed upon the surface of the scale, translucent and radiant, resembling a polished gem. The lotus rotated and expanded, growing to the size of a human head. Its petals swayed gently, releasing countless specks of blue light. In an instant, dense water attribute spiritual qi filled the hall. Inside his stone cabin, Han Li raised a hand and captured one of the light specks. It vanished upon contact. He closed his eyes. A cool sensation spread rapidly through his body. When he opened his eyes again, a trace of satisfaction appeared. The energy was pure, undeniably so. Only the scales of a black Qilin could produce such power. The other cultivators reached the same conclusion. The woman flicked her wrist and the lotus vanished. The scattered light disappeared as well. She continued. Secondly, the hardness of Qilin scales rivals that of even the strongest true spirits, such as true dragons. Even after separation from the body, they remain nearly indestructible by ordinary means. She tossed the scale into the air. It hovered motionless. Golden light flashed from her hands, forming 2 small axes, each about a foot long, radiating a sharp and dangerous aura. With a focused expression, she sent them flying. They struck the scale with a loud clang. The scale was knocked back but remained completely intact. The demonstration continued. She chanted softly, summoning a pillar of azure flames that engulfed the scale. 3-colored azure tribulation flames. Exclamations arose from the audience, many filled with envy. Yet when the flames receded, the scale was unharmed. She unleashed several more attacks of varying attributes. None had any effect. Finally, she released a Devil Dao technique, producing a cloud of blood mist. Even this failed to corrode the scale. The demonstration concluded. She retrieved the scale, returned it to the jade box, sealed it, and stepped back without further words. The white-robed elderly man stepped forward again, smiling. The 3 true spirit black Qilin scales have a starting price of 15 million spirit stones. Each increment must be at least 1 million. Bidding begins now. 17 million. 18 million. 20 million. The price rose rapidly, increasing by 1 to 2 million at a time. Many first-time participants were completely overwhelmed and abandoned any intention of bidding. Han Lai remained calm, though a faint trace of surprise flickered in his eyes. Even at this stage, so many cultivators still possessed such vast wealth. He did not act immediately. Instead, he observed the steadily climbing price, his lips slightly dry, waiting for the right moment. In the face of 3 true spirit scales, tens of millions of spirit stones were reduced to mere numbers. Everyone desired an immediate breakthrough. After all advancement for deity transformation, cultivators was exceedingly difficult. Most remained trapped at the early stage for their entire lives, unable to progress until death. These scales were in essence a rare opportunity. As a result, the atmosphere quickly turned fervent, with everyone attempting to secure them. However, no matter how strong one's desire, one still had to recognize one's limits. Once the price exceeded 25 million spirit stones, nearly all participants withdrew from the bidding. Only 3 cultivators remained. One of them was the same individual who had previously obtained the true toad spirit blood. His tone remained as languid as before. Of the other 2, one voice sounded aged and coarse, while the other was clear and pleasant. It was evident that they were an elderly man and a young female cultivator. The bids increased steadily in increments of 1 million spirit stones, and the price soon approached 30 million. When the owner of the lazy voice raised the bid to 30 million, the other 2 fell silent. It was clear that this price had exceeded what they could afford, leaving them no choice but to withdraw. All eyes turned toward the air above the auction platform, where the number on the massive disc slowly shifted in color. Once it turned completely crimson, the final price would be confirmed. 31 million. An unfamiliar voice suddenly sounded. The entire hall paused for a brief moment before all attention shifted toward the stone chamber where Han Li was seated. Even at such an astonishing price, someone was still willing to bid. Inside the chamber, Han Li remained calm and composed. 32 million. This time the lazy voice carried a hint of surprise. 33 million. Han Li raised the price again without hesitation. 34 million. The lazy voice responded only after a brief pause. 35 million. Many cultivators were left stunned. Although these were true spirit scales, the price had reached an unreasonable level. Even spirit treasures, ranked at the lower end of the chaotic myriad spirit roll, were valued at around this amount. 35 million? Fellow Taoist Chi, I suspect this person does not possess such wealth and is merely bidding to disrupt me. Should you not verify whether he truly has the required spirit stones? The lazy voice said coldly. I will personally verify it after the auction concludes. Until then, the process will proceed as usual. Please continue, the white-robed elder replied with a calm smile. He clearly had no intention of offending either party before learning their identities. In that case, I will not continue bidding. I wish to see whether this fellow Taoist can truly produce something worth 35 million spirit stones as collateral. The lazy voice sounded displeased, and as promised, he withdrew from the bidding. The number on the disc soon turned crimson. The white-robed elder announced that Han Li had obtained the 3 true spirit scales. Immediately after, he and the female appraiser carrying the jade box flew toward Han Li's chamber. They arrived shortly and stopped outside. The elder flipped his hand, producing an azure badge. With a gentle wave, he opened the chamber and entered, followed by the female appraiser. After stepping inside, the elder briefly examined Han Li before offering a polite salute. Your item has been delivered, fellow Taoist. Please provide the spirit stones. If you have items for collateral, fellow Taoist, he will evaluate them and apply appropriate deductions. If necessary, I can also summon the other appraisers. His tone was courteous and measured. I trust your judgment, brother Chi, fellow Taoist. Please examine this. Han Li glanced at the jade box, then flicked his sleeve. A small brocade box appeared in his hand. The elder accepted it calmly and opened the lid. A rich fragrance immediately filled the chamber. His expression changed abruptly. A myriad-year spirit herb. He inhaled sharply, then looked at Han Li with a trace of astonishment. The female appraiser was equally startled. She stepped forward and examined the contents. Within the box, surrounded by white light, lay a pristine white herb several inches long. Runes flickered faintly around it. Myriad-year spirit runes. It does appear to be a genuine specimen, but further verification is required, she said after careful observation. This falls within your expertise, fellow Taoist, he the elder said respectfully. She nodded and took the box, then produced a slender green jade ruler about a foot long, engraved with more than 20 spiral patterns. Her eyes flashed as she slowly brought the ruler toward the herb. Before contact was made, white spiritual light erupted with a soft ringing sound. At the same time, the spiral patterns lit up one by one, emitting sharp green light. When the 11th pattern illuminated, her composed expression finally showed a trace of change. After another careful inspection, she spoke firmly. This is indeed a myriad-year spirit herb, a snowworm herb approximately 11,000 years old. Due to its rarity, it is more valuable than ordinary specimens. I estimate its worth at 7 million spirit stones. 7 million. That aligns with my expectations. Do you agree, fellow Taoist? The elder asked, turning to Han Li. I have no objections. I also have additional items. They should suffice. Azure light flashed from Han Li's wrist as 4 jade boxes appeared. He tossed them forward calmly. The elder caught them and opened each in turn. Though he tried to remain composed, a slight twitch in his eyelid betrayed his reaction. Are these all myriad-year spirit herbs? He asked, his voice slightly strained. Is there an issue? Do you not accept them? Han Li replied with a faint smile. Of course we do, the elder said, forcing a chuckle, though his shock was evident. The female appraiser examined each herb carefully. When she finished, disbelief appeared on her face. While individual myriad-year herbs were less valuable than true spirit scales, their practical applications were far greater. They could be used to refine numerous pills, and demand always exceeded supply. Moreover, their high value made them a secondary currency, second only to spirit stones. While some items might be rejected, no establishment would refuse such herbs. Since, fellow Taoist, he has verified their authenticity, these 3 true spirit scales now belong to you, the elder said, handing over the brocade box with a polite smile. Thank you. Han Li retrieved the box, inspected its contents briefly, and nodded in satisfaction. Although the elder was curious about how Han Li had obtained so many rare herbs, he did not ask. He stored the items and left the chamber, with the appraiser returning to the auction platform. Though some time had passed, it was insignificant to cultivators accustomed to meditating for months. As soon as the 2 reappeared, everyone focused on them, eager to know the outcome. The transaction has been completed successfully. We will now proceed to the next item. This is a spirit treasure listed on the chaotic myriad spirit roll, surpassing the value of the scales. The divine spirit treasure, sea-raising halberd. Starting price 20 million spirit stones. Without revealing any details about Han Li, the elder continued. Another appraiser stepped forward and produced a shimmering blue halberd. The crowd's interest surged once more. After a brief demonstration of its power, fierce bidding resumed. Meanwhile, Han Li paid no attention. His focus remained entirely on the black scale in his hand. In the end, the halberd was sold for 35 million spirit stones. At last, the final auction item was about to be revealed.